Welcome to the Unscripted podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Nicastro. I am welcoming back a guest today who was on in late 2021 talking about how his business has embraced the as a service business model. So I'm excited to welcome back Dave Mackerness, who is director at Kaer, which is a Singapore-based company known for pioneering cooling as a service. Dave is also a Standout 50 leader from 2024. Dave, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks, Sarah. It's great to be with you.
It has been quite some time. When I think back to our initial podcast conversation, there is one thing you talked about that forever sticks out of my mind, which is the cow and milk analogy. So, when you were talking about the early days within Care of, you know, deciding to go down the as a service path, I think it was the founder or one of the leaders said, if you want milk, you don't go and buy the cow, you go and buy the milk, right? And so that analogy has just stuck with me ever since. So thank you for that cow story. So in 2021, CARE had just sort of I don't want to say completed because I'm sure the journey is ongoing, but you had successfully transitioned the majority of the business from a more traditional service model to cooling as a service. So I'm excited to catch up today on what's new since. But before we do that, if there are folks who didn't catch our first conversation, could you just give a bit of context about yourself, the business, and maybe just kind of a very high level recap of, the cooling as a service journey?
Yep, sure. So essentially, so Care has been a cooling company for 70 years. And
Mhm.
we kind of went through that journey of going from a distribution business of technology and equipment to a turnkey contractor or a system integrator. So putting different bits of equipment together, then moving to performance-based contracts where you'd have to design it, build it, and operate it at a certain sort of standard or efficiency level. And then we transitioned to cooling as a service from there. So we kind of see it as sort of a natural progression and sort of moving up to as a service.
Mhm.
But we've always been doing design, supply, installation of big industrial, retail, commercial buildings for cooling. So
Mhm.
that's chiller plants, cooling towers, chillers, and things like that. For us, we made the shift to cooling as a service in 2012, 2013.
Mhm.
And actually, it was 2018 that we made the decision to stop all of our legacy-based products and services and shift completely to cooling as a service. And I think when we last spoke in 2021, I believe, we still had some legacy.
Mhm.
I think 20% of our business was that legacy, but 80% had moved to cooling as a service. What's changed since then? So we've continued on that journey. I think at the beginning we wondered if this was a crazy idea, which we would then have to revert back from. I
Mhm.
think the opposite has proven true, that it is a fantastic idea that more people are moving towards. More providers are moving towards as a service, both in cooling and also in other building industries as well. We've got some partners that have come on board and are driving our expansion outside of Singapore. So now, yeah, we've kind of grown. We've got more buildings on the platform
Mhm.
and continue to sort of drive CAS outside of Singapore. So now we are, I think we spoke last, we were kind of inside Singapore moving out. We're now kind of much bigger in India, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Singapore as well, but we're sort of moving to that regional approach.
Yeah. When you mention the timelines again, it reminds me, there's honestly the cow story does always stand out in my mind, but there's a number of things from our conversation that have stuck with me and that I often share with others, right? And one of those is, it was about a decade from the time that CARE decided to move to cooling as a service and until you were sort of 100% transitioned to that model. And I think when we were speaking, you're right, you were kind of toward the end of that transition. And I always remind folks it's this isn't a decision that when made, it's like a switch and you flip it and you transition 100% of your install base to this new model. It can be something that can take time. It can be something you trial with a portion of your customer base to sort of, see how it goes. Yeah, I would encourage anyone who's, kind of considering this journey to go back and listen to that first episode because there was a lot of really good points in it. Um, you mentioned one of the things that has happened since we spoke last is that expansion, and so Kaer is now scaling, has scaled, and is continuing to scale beyond Singapore and in a number of ways. Can you share a little bit more how that came to be and what that looks like for you today?
Sure. So we're a Singapore headquartered company.
Hmm.
And so we sort of naturally started testing and sort of trialing CAS here. But Singapore is a very sophisticated but very small market, right? So for some of the international listeners, we're only about 7 million people. It's basically a city state as opposed to a large country. So we were kind of driven to expand by the impact we could have in terms of these climate goals and metrics that we have for ourselves. So, the great thing about cooling as a service is the more energy you can save and the more efficient you can be, two things happen. One is it's a more sort of financially viable product for your customers, so you can make it worthwhile for them. The business case is there. But then the other thing is that because you're using less energy, the sustainability case is there. It's kind of linked, right? Sustainability and profitability is linked because that key lever of running cooling systems more efficiently does both things.
Hmm.
So we needed to get outside of Singapore so we could really have more of an impact in terms of carbon emissions reductions. And we just looked at markets that really we could have a huge impact on. So India is a massive market to start with. It's an extremely fast growing market in terms of cooling. And it's one where we can have a huge sort of shift in terms of efficiencies and performances of the equipment. Indonesia, likewise. So India and Indonesia, those two are two big expansion markets for us. And then Malaysia is just up the road. So Singapore is sort of a little dot that's at the bottom of the Malaysian peninsula. So, we do a lot of work with our clients there. And I think the expansion has kind of gone from Singapore-based customers that then bring us to other buildings across Asia. And I think that's where it sort of started, and we sort of then trialed CAS in these other markets.
Hmm.
There was some tweaking we had to do. I mean, cooling as a service is the same, on a podcast, what we talk about is the same in every market, but there are market specific requirements in terms of contracts and tax and things like that you need to make sure the model works. So we sort of did that. And then now we're really growing within those markets, expanding outside of those customers that we have. So I think it was sort of organic growth because of impact. And then now we've got those beachheads and we've got those offices set up. It's now growth in those markets as a priority.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. I'm curious what has been the most exciting aspect of that growth and also what has been the most challenging.
I think in terms of excitement, it really is the size of the market. So when you look at I had a discussion with one of our customers in India, and I
Mhm.
was saying, we look after 30 million square feet of space. And I was very proud of that. And then he kind of came back and said, well, we have, you know, 50 million square feet of office space just in this city alone. And
Mhm.
across India, it's 10 times that. So I think that just the sheer scale of it is very exciting. And the conversations now have really shifted from a building by building approach, which I
Mhm.
think is how any as a service offering kind of starts. You're talking to individual sort of stakeholders within a building. And it's now kind of elevated to the portfolio based approach, which is, a CEO or a CFO is now having a strategic discussion with us on, outsourcing across their building portfolio.
Mhm.
And one thing is scale. I mean, scale is a huge benefit, but the other is there are lots of sort of new and additional benefits that come to our customers and us if you take a portfolio based approach. So I think that's really exciting, is understanding shifting a portfolio over to cooling as a service and helping a business transition to an as a service model versus a building. So that's
Mhm.
pretty exciting. Um, it is obviously working in new markets is also exciting for us. So we have very good partners in India and Indonesia and Malaysia that are kind of supporting and growing with us. And also now, because we have these growth partners that have joined us, so we got a support from Patrizia and Mitsui, who have then invested in Kaer as a business to grow outside of Singapore. So working with them has been really exciting as well, and how that can sort of drive our expansion.
Yeah. What about challenges?
Challenges. So I think there is, as you go into these new markets, there, like I say, the contract and the legal and the tax implications, you just
Mhm.
need to sort of manage. I wouldn't really say that's a challenge. I think that's just something you have to overcome. It's
Sure.
not difficult. It's just something you go through.
A learning.
Um, yeah. But I think that was kind of, something we had to go through, but not necessarily too difficult. And then the next thing is making sure that you have good ecosystem partners. So for cooling as a service, you need to do so all the stuff we do internally, we do design internally, we do optimization internally, a lot of the software we do, but we also rely on partners. So for example, the manufacturers who manufacture the equipment, the
Mhm.
hardware. We don't make chillers and cooling towers. We require support from those OEMs. We also don't do all of the installation ourselves. So we have project managers who will oversee installation, but we have to work with local contractors who can then put these chillers into buildings in these new sites. So making sure you have a good uh, network to support you as you deliver CAS is really important. And for us, for Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, we already had that because we had been in our legacy businesses, we had been in those markets. India was a bit new for us.
Mhm.
And so that's why I think we have a great partner we work with there and have done from the beginning, that can help us with some of those, sort of get up to speed with those capabilities and those services. So I think if you're looking at entering new markets, that would be a challenge. So
Mhm.
I would say, yeah, finding a local partner that can support you in that would be really beneficial.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Part of the, I guess, promise of the model, right, is you have to make good what you say you're going to do. So if you're not doing 100% of that yourself, then making sure you have that ecosystem set up and vetted, so that you're making good on the value proposition you're promising. Um,
Yeah, and I think, and I'll just jump in. That's one of the other challenges is cooling as a service for us is we have a care standard across all of our markets,
mhm,
and what we do is you basically you take the requirements in every market and you apply it to your model. So you kind of have this floating sea level of the service level you provide has to meet all the different markets,
mhm,
and delivering that in all markets can be tricky. So as a unique example, we are really pushing towards low GWP refrigerants, which I think to date hasn't really been a big focus for cooling companies. We started doing refrigerant management SOPs and protocols about 4 or 5 years ago, and really trying to transition to low GWP. But some of the equipment manufacturers don't offer those chillers that can use low GWP refrigerant in some markets. So it's really working with them to, okay, we use low GWP in Singapore as a standard. We want to do that across all of our markets. Can you support us in terms of, service, but also supplying products that fits that criteria in these markets? So that sometimes is a challenge, but I
mhm.
think you have a real conversation with your supply chain on this is what we want. If you're not there yet, we expect you to get there by these dates and times. This
Mhm.
is our procurement policy. This is how we're moving forward. And then they're all happy to have that conversation because these are, the latest machines, the latest technology. They want to sell it into these new markets. So I think
Yeah.
that's another one that's
Yeah.
important.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Okay, so when you and I caught up recently, we talked about, you have witnessed the struggle that some organizations have when they see the potential of an as a service model, but they're, not able to embrace it or execute it in a way that, leads to the success that Care has experienced. So I'm curious your take on a couple of aspects here. So one is, maybe a scenario where as a service is a great fit, it would be a great opportunity for an organization, but the business is not quite getting it. So maybe it's a mindset issue. Maybe, they love the idea of the model, but they're not willing to take on the risk that comes with it, that sort of thing. What have you observed that holds companies back from the potential that Care has been able to realize. You spent years bringing this to fruition, so I'm curious, where you see the biggest, I guess, self-inflicted barriers.
Mm. So I think I break the barriers of as a service into maybe two categories.
Hmm.
One category is as a service a good fit for whatever the product is that you're currently selling? And
Hmm.
maybe we can bundle that up and talk about that a little bit later. But the other one is, if as a service is right for your industry, what would stop you from doing it? And in the experience from the cooling market, what we found is there's a real sweet spot in terms of company size to be able to offer cooling as a service. So on one side, you have the very small companies, maybe they're energy performance contractors, or maybe they're a bit smaller in size, who are looking to increase move up the value chain and sort of do as a service. But there's a real capital issue there, in that you need huge amounts of capital, which some of these small companies won't have access to. So good financing partners is going to help you sort of overcome that challenge. The other is a trust issue. So you're working with big mission critical infrastructure, which has big implications for all of our customers, whether you're a data center or a shopping mall or a hotel. It's mission critical. So if you're a smaller company, how will you sort of make sure you have the trust of these big companies to offer that at a higher service level? So that's why the small companies, I think, struggle a little bit. The bigger companies equally struggle. So your big MNCs, they struggle not because of trust or not because of capital. They have both of those things. But actually, the bigger they are, the more legacy they have in the old way of working, which is selling product. They have factories that have to get product in boxes to customers. And
Hmm.
that product has to get off their balance sheet and be sold. And then, you have these revenues which have to increase, incrementally year on year. So because of that size and that legacy, it is very difficult for them to sort of shift to, okay, let's do as a service instead of selling products. Um, a lot of them have come to us and asked, can they be involved? How can they do it? And there's so many challenges that you wouldn't even think about. So one, as an example, how do you as a big MNC report to your stakeholders? Like if you're listed on the stock exchange, what are your metrics that drive your share price? As a service might change quite significantly those metrics, which could have an impact on your share price. So therefore, there's these financial reasons or reporting reasons which actually could hinder your ability to transition. The other is, a lot of these bigger companies will try, and I think you alluded to it before, let's take one service line or one product and try and servitize that, and then let's keep everything else as selling products. So you're kind of trying to move into it. Now, again, that's difficult because the sales process is very different. The types of salespeople you need is different. The incentive structures you have is very different. What we found with these larger companies is they're sort of testing the water, but then, this is a small business line. It's not growing as quickly as they wanted to. Meanwhile, over here, they've got this huge factory that's pumping out boxes. So why am I investing my time and effort in this, trying to grow this
Hmm.
business unit? Whereas I can just, let's redeploy the people, put them in here and sell the boxes. So I think a lot of them tested the water, tried to move into it, and then realized actually it's a little bit difficult. Let's go back to selling boxes. And that's where I find this sweet spot of size to get the big MNC technology providers and the big REITs and developers and property owners. You can have a medium-sized business in the middle, which can sort of bridge that gap. And I
Hmm.
think that's where Kaer was quite lucky. We had the capital and we had the trust because of our size, but also we weren't too big and we didn't actually sell hardware at the time because we were a turnkey or system integrator. Because we weren't that, we could then, I think, transition. So that's a key one: is are you too small or too big to get into it? And then the question is, if you are, that's fine. How do you then make that transition? Now, if you're small, you grow by doing project at a time. And this is what we did originally, but 12, 13 years ago. Grow slowly over time and then build up to a size so you can then become an as a service provider. If you're a big company, how can you be part of the as a service revolution without doing it yourself? So this is something your listeners will have to fact check, because I haven't fact checked it myself, but I believe that if I look at the car and the ride hailing industry, so
Hmm.
mobility as a service, I don't think any big car brands have as a service offerings,
Hmm.
but there is, I think, car brands do invest in ride-hailing apps. So we have an app out here called Grab. I believe your global listeners will have, Lyft or Uber.
Mhm.
So people like Toyota, Mercedes, Audi, whatever the car companies are, if they don't do as a service, they can invest in these as a service businesses and then sort of still be a part of that. So I think that's where, if I was advising a big MNC that is struggling with this transition, see how you can get involved in other ways, being part of the supply chain, working with the as a service providers to support them giving as a service,
Mhm.
as opposed to necessarily doing it yourself. And I think that's a way a lot of people could look at getting into it.
Yeah, yeah. That description makes a lot of sense. You articulated challenges on both the smaller side and the bigger side really well. What about going back to the point you made of the business model not being a fit for every type of product?
Okay, so this realization came to me. So I was at a conference, and the organizer sat me next to someone who was in lifting. So they're in cranes and lifting. And they basically said that they wanted to servitize their business. And they said, Dave, you can sit next to them and talk to them about it and share how they can do it. And I started by saying, fantastic, no problem. At the end of this, we'll have it all fixed. And actually, at the end of it, I kind of talked myself out of it and sort of saying, well, this doesn't fit or as a service. And then I started thinking, well, what is the criteria for what industries or what products should be servitized? And it really comes down to two key verticals. One is complexity. So how difficult or complex is it to do what you do? And the other is how expensive it is, right? So if you have complexity and capex or cost, those are kind of the two key ones. So if you graph out those on the X and Y axis, in the bottom left of that kind of graph or that matrix, you have things that are very cheap and very simple. Now, those sorts of things you don't really need to outsource or buy as a service because they're easy to do and they're super cheap. They're not costing your business much money.
Mhm.
So what I would say is if you fit within that category of stuff that's super cheap and super easy, then the reason for outsourcing really is around customer experience,
Mhm.
and or transparency, customer experience, or simplicity. So for example, music, right?
Mhm.
I buy music on Spotify not because CDs were expensive or not because it was hard to buy them. It was super easy to do both of those things and it was super cheap. But I get a better user experience when I move to Spotify. So actually, if you look at those simple and cheap, that kind of quadrant, that's really where a lot of us use as a service businesses. Anything on your mobile phone kind of
Mhm.
falls under that category. Then you sort of move up to things that are complex but quite cheap to do. So those are things that you may have not had an as a service offering in the past. So as a business, you built expertise and capabilities to do these things. Um, and it therefore doesn't cost you very much money. So as an example, if you look at CRM programs, so a lot of companies will do sales by having meetings with salespeople using Excel tracking sheets potentially, and phone calls and to-do lists. That's how they manage business development. Can you now move to an as a service offering like a Salesforce or someone like that, even communications like a Twilio, someone like that, or even like recruitment? You may have got good at doing something quite complicated and therefore bring your cost down, but there might be offerings. So for those sort of things, I would say you should look at it every 3 to 5 years. Are there options in terms of as a service that can support you in that? Then you start going to the expensive category, right? Expensive and simple, and expensive and complicated. Expensive and simple really is if you have a proposition where you can do it cheaper than the person themselves. So if I'm a big company and I have a low cost of capital, I might be able to servitize my product and essentially bring the cost down for my customers.
Mhm.
So think about things like lighting as a service. Lighting as a service is not very difficult. You just change the lights to LEDs and you save energy. But if you're a huge company with a big balance sheet and your cost of capital is low, maybe you can sort of have some optimization there and you can deliver that better. If you're a small company and you're looking to offer as a service in something that's very simple and easy, but very expensive, that's going to be tricky for you because usually your customers have bigger balance sheets and lower cost of capital than you do. So
Mhm.
you're not going to make the financial business case. And I think this is where the crane one came to me, which was they are very expensive equipment, But the providers of the technology, so the provider of the cranes, they don't operate them. They don't really manage them. It's all managed and operated by the customers themselves. So
Hmm.
it's hard to, you're taking away a key area where you can add value as an
Right.
as a service provider. Then you go to the top quadrant, which is very expensive and very complicated. For me, that is servitize it today. If you don't, you're losing money and you're taking on business risk.
Hmm.
And that is because you are investing huge amounts of your resources generally into a non-core activity, which generally means you're not as good as it as you need to be to get the top level of performance. So cooling as a service is in there. I would put data as a service in there. You know, I think that the maybe the poster child of as a service is the Rolls-Royce company, which did, you know, power by the hour and thrust
Hmm.
as a service. That is where you really need to outsource to a provider who can add value in terms of operations, optimization,
Hmm.
both in terms of reliability and delivery of that service level, because they are a provider of that and it's a core to their business, but also because they then have scale.
Hmm.
They can then run it more efficiently. Now, with cooling, it's maybe to some of the listeners who aren't in the cooling world, it's not a function of buy the best equipment, you get the best um, uh, energy performance and the lowest carbon emissions. You can buy the best kit, install it perfectly, and if you don't run it very well, your carbon
Hmm.
emissions can be double what they're supposed to be. So that level of complexity of management and operations is really important. So I think look at where you are in that sort of in the industry you're in and the product that you sell, and then the selling point to your customers is different. And in some cases, it might not, depending on the size of your business or the sort of what you can offer. Maybe servitization is not the right path.
Hmm.
Um, and then look at other ways to get into that sort of that ecosystem.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the matrix. I think that's really helpful. And good awareness to have for people that might be in some of those different segments or, want a different way to sort of reflect on would this work? Could this work? If so, when? If so, how? Those sorts of things. I think also the point you just made on the complexity aspect is it can be complexity of equipment, but it can also be complexity of operation. And that's where, the expertise and the knowledge comes into play as well, right? So, thinking about what experience, what insight, what knowledge do we have that our customers could benefit from, and factoring that in when you think about those different categories. Yeah, really good. Okay, so as Kaer has matured with Cass, you described to me a shift that, when this started, you're talking about, other than the customers that maybe were in on the initial concept or raised their hands to sort of go first, I'm sure there was a certain amount of educating your customer base on, why you're taking a new approach, what the new approach is, and what it means for them. And so now that you've gone through that process, you mentioned that you're now finding yourself needing to determine how best to drive the behavior of your customers to get the most out of the model. Can you talk about what that means?
Yeah, sure. So when you move to as a service, essentially what you're doing may not be very different from a technical perspective. What you're doing is not that different. So we are still designing cooling systems, procuring cooling systems, installing cooling systems, and operating cooling systems. We did that when we sold that to customers, and we do that as a service. But the difference is you do it for yourself and then you offer the outcome as opposed to doing it for a customer who then requires you to sort of tick all these boxes in terms of what you're doing. And one of the key things is the behavior of the customer is super different in both of those worlds. And as you transition to the as a service world, you need to make sure that you can transition your customer confidently. I think with as a service, every single company would say, this is a great idea. It works. It's just a fantastic idea. It's the transitioning from the old world to the new world that is the hard part. And I
Mhm.
think that's where we built a lot of experience around how do you take them on this journey. So as an example, we when you're an as a service provider, we say in your building, I will give you chilled water at 8 degrees. I will build all the chiller plant, I'll put it all together, I'll run it for you, and I'll give you 8 degrees. So the only thing you care about now is 8 degrees chill water. Um, you don't care what chillers I use, what cooling towers I use, what's on, what's running. You don't care about any of that, how I operate it, how I maintain it, as long as it's 8 degrees. But that's a very scary concept for a customer because you're saying, this is all behind the curtain. This is the black box of how I do it. And then you just care about the outcome. So when we started, we said, look, this is my black box. This is my business. You can't come in. Don't get involved in what I'm doing. You just get involved in the outcome. But that's very scary for customers. So what we kind of looked at was how can we, instead of building a glass box, oh, sorry, a black box, how can we build the glass box?
Mhm.
And what that means is you can still maintain all of your um, autonomy around what you're doing and how you're doing it, but let customers see in without getting involved. And so that's the behavior shift, which is you've got to be transparent without them in the old world getting involved in how you do it. So
Mhm.
as an example, customers will say, I want to see the control system that's running my cooling system so that I want to see that dashboard of everything that's working so I can know the cooling is all fine. We used to show them that. And then we now move to, we built a customer experience app for all of our customers to show them the 8 degrees and everything that's involved in providing that 8 degrees that the customer should care about and be able to audit.
Mhm.
So we sort of, we have the same data and the same information, but just shown in very different ways. One is like an engineering kind of dashboard that we use, and the other is a customer experience app that they use. And it's the same information, same data, just shown in a different way. So I think as you look at, instead of, you know, moving from doing it for your customer for doing it for yourself, don't forget that they still are going to need that transparency to see what you're doing. So that's how you sort of drive behavior. And what you'll find is you'll have to invest quite a lot of money into customer experience, managing customers. As a contractor, you design equipment, you install it. If it's running, it's running. If it's not, it's not. That is 20% of cooling as a service. 80% is managing customers, making sure they're happy, making sure they're confident with what you're delivering, making sure it's auditable, building an experience around it for them. And I think that's where we struggled at the beginning. We didn't realize that was so important.
Yeah. I think, this is a conversation that's come up in different ways when businesses are looking to servitize, and you're taking back control of the equipment itself, right? Like you said, you're doing it and they're receiving the outcome versus doing it for them, or in, the way that they want you to do it, right? So there's this handover of control. And with that, often, at least over time, businesses who are doing this are able to find efficiency and to optimize not just the outcome, but the way the outcome is achieved. But if the customer doesn't necessarily like how that's being optimized, right? Like you can run into issues where if you're not doing it the way they would have done it, right? And so this idea is making sure that you're giving them enough information to feel comfortable in the fact that you are achieving the outcomes and how you're achieving the outcomes while reminding them that you're in the driver's seat, not them. Like I can see how that would be a really tricky transition, right? Because ultimately they'll come along and realize that it is the outcome that matters most, although it makes sense that they want to understand where that's coming from, but they're giving up, some of that control for other benefits that they're getting from the relationship.
Yeah, and I think the way that we handled it was, in the old world, you are always reporting to your customer what you're doing. So
Mhm.
think of it as emails with PDFs. This is the servicing we're doing. This is the information. This is all the things we keep. Every month, you give them reports. In the new world, what we do is all of that information is stored in Care Connect, our app, and you can, as a customer, come in at any point in time and see anything. So if you want to see what the chill water supply temperature was at building B at 3:45 p.m. 3 weeks ago, you can go into this app and you can see exactly what it was. We track it
Mhm.
on a minute by minute basis and show that to our customer. If you want to see the servicing of any of our equipment, we have a tab where you can see all of our service reports signed by all of our engineers. All of the checklists and documents have all been done. You can go in and see that. So I think instead of sending them a service report every month, which is what the old world was, we make it available to them.
Hmm.
And they can dive in whenever they want. So it's convenient and it's transparent without pushing that behavior of I expect a report every month.
Right.
Because that's the difference between it's mine versus it's yours. If
Yeah.
it's yours and I'm doing it for you, I need to report to you. If it's mine and I'm doing it for me, I just need to give you confidence that I'm doing it at a standard that's acceptable to you as a customer. So that's
Right.
where we built this app to allow them to jump in and out wherever they want. And they can, and also a lot of customers will have auditing requirements, right? If you're a data center, your data center customers who are going to put their data in that data center need to audit your cooling system and your servicing and all those sorts of things. So make it easy for your customers to see what you're doing and access what they need for their requirements
Hmm.
without, like I say, reporting to them all of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good distinction. Okay, Dave, the last thing I want to ask you about is, in the almost 5 years since we spoke last, a whole lot has happened in technology and, digital sophistication, as I like to refer to it. So obviously, we've really gotten to the point where we're entrenched in the AI era, and everyone's looking at how to apply that to their businesses and what that means, what it will change, what it won't change, etc. What does this look like for Kaer? So in 5 years' time, what has changed? How are you using AI? What opportunities or challenges has that created? How has this piece of things evolved?
So we started our AI journey back in 2017, where we
Mhm.
built basically an AI platform that helps us optimize our cooling systems. But I think for us now, it has changed everything about what we do and how we offer cooling as a service. In the past, it was very much a hardware conversation.
Mhm.
Now it is a AI conversation. And what I mean by that is generally what you would say is a life cycle of a cooling system. You would say it is most efficient on day one. As soon as you bought the new equipment and you've installed it, that's when it's at its best performance. And over time, that'll deteriorate 10, 15 years. And then once it deteriorates well, deterioration happens in two parts. One is efficiency and performance. So it's not as good as it could be. And then there's reliability that comes into that. So generally, as you go down that curve, you kind of find if it's not as efficient or performing as high as it could do, you accept it and you just manage it as best you can. But when it stops becoming reliable, then you change it. Right. So think about your latest iPhone. Like I've got an iPhone 15. It's not as good as the 17 or the 18 that's coming out, but I make do until the phone doesn't work anymore. And then I get the next best one. So it was really that best on day one approach.
Mhm.
For Kaer, our best cooling system was the first one we installed back in 2013. That's our most highest performing cooling system. It's the same technology, the same equipment that we installed in 2013, no upgrade in hardware. But over that time, it has the most amount of data.
Mhm.
And with the most amount of data, it then can train the models better and it can then optimize that system better. So this is you alluded to it at the beginning of our conversation around complexity of operations.
Mhm.
Cooling is really complex in terms of what you change and tweak on all the different set points and all the different bits of equipment you have to deliver the outcome.
Mhm.
So now your best plant is not the newest one. Your best plant is the one with the most data.
Mhm.
And also you can learn from different plants across the portfolio. So that's really exciting for us is that AI has given us the ability not only to improve, to maintain the performance, but to improve it over time. And that's a real sort of shift. The other is how you can use AI to deliver a better customer experience. So now we're looking at, okay, we built AI platforms for ourselves. How do we build it so that our customers can get some benefits as well? So I think that's the next sort of area we're looking at. But there is a double-edged sword with AI, and that is no one really understands what it's doing.
Mhm.
So if you just talk about to the layman, like most laymen will sort of engage with AI with these large language models, your chat GPTs or your Copilots or your Claudes. So when I use, we use Copilot, we use the Microsoft system. When I use that, I have no idea how it's doing what it's doing, but it gives me these fantastic results when I'm trying to do any of my workflows in my day-to-day life. So not understanding what it does is scary for me. And then the other is sometimes it comes back with nonsense.
Hmm.
So I'll be talking, having conversation with it, and it's obviously, I think they're called hallucinations, or just the stuff it comes back with is rubbish. Or I asked to do a workflow, and it just comes up with a terrible result. And that's not risky for me because I can recognize that, and then I can do it again, or I can rework it. So when you're working at sort of the consumer level of AI, you can accept that fallibility.
Hmm.
When you're working with mission critical infrastructure, you cannot accept any fallibility whatsoever. So when we did this in 2017, we really just worked with, we have machine learning specialists, and we have some data scientists that help us build the algorithms. What we then did in 2022, 2023 is we built on sort of a second layer, um, which essentially we put in all of the thermodynamics, all of the pump curves, all of the fan curves of what really can happen in the physical world.
Hmm.
So what we have are these two layers. One is your machine learning, and then the other is kind of the validation layer, which says, if you give me back nonsense, I check it against what's actually possible and what's going to impact in terms of my service level, and I only take action if it follows this criteria.
Hmm.
So now that we're building these AI systems, I think it's not just AI, it's also how you build in safety, how you build in transparency around that, such that our engineers have confidence in doing it. So when we first did, I think we rolled out our Kaer AI system in 2018. So we built it in 2017 and 2018. All of our engineers were really worried. Why is
Hmm.
it changing set points? Why is it doing stuff? I don't know what's happening. And that's impacting my performance, or I've got to explain to my customer why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Hmm.
Whereas now we have this validation layer, we have more confidence that, okay, it will not do anything. If the chill water supply temperature has to be 8 degrees, it will take no action if it's going to affect chill water supply temperature.
Hmm.
So I think that's also a really interesting part of AI is how do you build on these layers for safety, for transparency, so you give confidence in it. Because like I say, it's kind of this, whenever people talk about AI, everyone loves it, everyone likes the output, but as everyone is also kind of scared about it because,
Hmm.
the understanding of what it is kind of limited to a few very, very smart data scientists, and it doesn't sort of trickle down to all of us.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost everyone loves it and everyone hates it at the same time. Like there's the benefit of it, but there is fear, and that can be true within the workforce, that can be true within the customer base. When we were talking about the black box versus the glass box, that's kind of what I was thinking, right? Is as you're able to change how you provide the outcome you are guaranteeing, less on-site visits because you're implementing all of these efficiencies through different technologies that make it so that you're not wasting a technician's time to go there. It doesn't mean they're not going. It just means they're not going when they don't have to, or they're spending less time because they already know what they're going to do, etc. For a customer who's used to a traditional relationship, it's just, well, you're not here as much, right? So, how are you achieving this? Or the issue that always comes up with companies that are trying to understand how this model could fit is a customer saying, well, we shouldn't have to pay as much because you're not here as much, right? Like they're not talking in terms of the outcome itself, which is why I think the piece you mentioned about how to navigate the shift in control, in that relationship is very important and nuanced, right? Because they're still your customer, right? But it's what they're purchasing from you is different. And so making sure that it's clear that we're going to deliver this outcome. You can come to the portal and look at how that's being achieved, right? We're not like, don't tell us how you want it to be achieved because that's something we're going to figure out and refine and improve over time, which is really interesting.
Yeah, and I think, and the last thing on AI, I think that is making a lot of press at the moment is the downside and the negative side of it in terms of energy. So
Hmm.
it's actually not dissimilar to how people saw cooling, right? So
Hmm.
air conditioning and cooling is vital, but it uses huge amounts of energy. So when we did cooling as a service, one of the propositions is we provide ultra low carbon cooling at an affordable rate, essentially. So the reduction in energy consumption was a key part of it. So cooling is great, carbon is bad. Can we de-link the two? I think AI is the same, which is AI is great, although there are some concerns on productivity and job markets and things like that. But taking that aside, AI is fantastic, but the energy it uses is terrible. So how can we de-link the two things? And the thing I like about the Care AI platform is we're using AI to reduce energy consumption.
Hmm.
So we're actually, although we're using more energy in the AI systems we're building, we're actually taking the energy out of the cooling systems we're building. So hopefully you've kind of got that net zero or improvement in terms of energy and performance. So
Yeah.
that's I think the other one is we're really concerned with water and energy consumption of these AI systems.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Dave, as you look ahead, hopefully it won't be 5 years until we speak again, but as you look ahead over the next, 1 or 2 years, what do you envision for care, for as a service, AI, any of it? What are you most excited about?
So I think the trend in cooling as a service has continued along how we had hoped it would,
Hmm.
which is we have grown, more people have come into the market and offering as a service, and actually that has inspired other built environment industries to servitize as well. So I think that movement of as a service is really only continuing to grow, just like computing as a service and data as a service has done, which is great. I think now what we're really seeing and what we're really excited about is, like I say, this portfolio based approach. So instead of buildings making the decision to do cooling as a service, we're now seeing portfolio owners making the strategic business decision to servitize all of their cooling assets
Hmm.
across all of their portfolio. And that's a very different conversation. It's much more exciting in terms of impact, but also in terms of the benefits for the customer. In how do you move from this building by building approach to really leapfrog and go to the portfolio based approach? So REITs, developers, and portfolio owners are now having those conversations. So I think that's really exciting. The data thing will continue. I mean, all of the stuff we talked about in terms of AI will probably change, before this
Hmm.
podcast is released, because that's always kind of changing and updating. But we're kind of seeing what are the new software suites or tools we can build off of our data library. So we've got a data library that's growing. The more plants we have, the more data comes in. The data we have actually goes back to 1993 when we started doing control systems. So as that grows, it becomes exponentially more beneficial, and then you sort of put these tools on. So now we're looking at sort of agents. I think everyone's talking about AI agents now. How can we use those? So we built compliance agents that help us oversee compliance on hardware and how we're doing service and maintenance and stuff like that. So I think that's really exciting.
Hmm.
But really, it's sort of moving to a future where this model is the norm for
Hmm.
most businesses. Lighting as a service, cooling as a service, transport as a service. I think that's where we're moving towards, and I don't think it's that far off to when it is actually the norm in Asia. For example, it's a very people are very receptive to the model now. You've kind of gone over that trial period. It's been 13, 14 years where people have been doing this. We have renewals of customers who are renewing and staying with the model. We are yet to see anyone to go back. So
Hmm.
once you buy the Spotify, you're not buying CDs anymore.
Right.
So I think that's exciting, and it's just scaling it to really get that impact. So yeah, that's the most exciting thing for us.
Yeah, it is exciting. I mean, you have all of this experience and knowledge, and I think there's a lot left to learn, right? That's one of the aspects of this model is you are forced to continue to get better, right? And to continue to level up and to continue to deliver. And I think that that's a really good thing. But there's a lot that other industries can look to cooling as a service and to Care to learn from. And so yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out in the next few years and to watch your continued success.
Thank
So
you.
yeah, thank you for coming back on and sharing an update and some more about what's been going on the last couple of years. I really appreciate it.
It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me on again.
Absolutely. You can learn more by visiting the home of Unscripted at futureoffieldservice.com. The podcast is published in partnership with IFS. You can learn more at ifs.com. As always, thank you for listening.